It was just another quiet night at a small roadside diner. The smell of coffee filled the air, and a tired waitress named Maddie tried her best to keep her smile alive. She'd been serving strangers all night, people who barely noticed her, people who left without a thank you. But when 3 drunk thugs walked in and turned that silence into cruelty, her night took a dark turn. Sound of a plate clattering, laughter echoing, they mocked her, insulted her, and when one of them grabbed her wrist, the whole diner froze. Brief pause, tension builds, low guitar hum, but then the door opened, and in walked a group of men in leather jackets. No words, no threats, just presence, bikers. Engine rumble fades in, cinematic build up. What happened next would remind everyone in that diner that kindness doesn't always wear a smile sometimes. It rides a Harley. The diner clock ticked past midnight. Only a few truckers and tired locals remained, nursing their coffee under the buzzing neon lights. Behind the counter, Maddie, a young waitress with messy blonde hair tucked under a paper hat, tried to hide her exhaustion with a polite smile. She'd been on her feet for 12 hours straight, smiling through spilled coffee, cold tips, and rude customers. But nothing could have prepared her for them. The door swung open with a harsh clang of the bell. 3 men walked in, loud, swaggering, and clearly drunk. Their leather jackets reeked of cheap beer and ego. Maddie tensed as they slumped into a booth, kicking the seats and laughing like they owned the place. "Hey, sweetheart," one of them called out, slapping the table. "Serve us, B*TCH. The diner went silent. Every eye turned toward Maddie. Her hands trembled slightly, but she forced a small, professional smile. "Good evening, gentlemen. What can I get you tonight?" They laughed again, mocking her calm tone. One of them whistled. Another made a crude joke. Maddie's throat tightened, but she didn't flinch. She'd seen worse. She had rent to pay, and walking away wasn't an option. The insults kept coming as she brought them their coffee and burgers. One of the men accidentally brushed her arm. Another called her names that made her cheeks burn. The cook in the back, an old man named Frank, watched through the pass window, jaw tight. He'd seen too many nights like this. Maddie tried to stay professional, but when one of them grabbed her wrist, she froze. "Come on, smile for us, huh?" He sneered. Before she could react, the bell over the door jingled again, and in walked 5 massive bikers. They weren't the kind you'd mistake for friendly travelers. Leather vests, heavy boots, tattoos crawling up their arms. Each one carried the quiet, dangerous confidence of men who didn't need to prove anything. The leader, a tall man with a gray beard and calm blue eyes, scanned the room. His gaze landed on Maddie, then on the thugs. The diner fell into a heavy silence. "Everything all right here, ma'am?" he asked, his voice low but steady. Maddie swallowed. "It's fine, sir," she whispered. Just serving them." The thug, still gripping her wrist, smirked. "Yeah, old man, she's serving us, so why don't you—" He didn't finish. The biker's hand shot out, gripping the man's wrist in a flash. The sound of cracking knuckles echoed through the diner. "Wrong answer." The biker growled. The thugs stumbled back, trying to act tough, but the rest of the bikers stood silent, still, and solid as mountains. Within seconds, the air changed. These weren't drunk punks anymore. They were cowards. The leader leaned in close to the man who'd grabbed Maddie. "Apologize." He hesitated. The biker tightened his grip just slightly. I'm sorry." The thug stammered. "Not to me." He turned to Maddie, face red with humiliation. "I'm sorry, ma'am." Maddie blinked, barely believing what she was seeing. Frank, the cook, finally stepped out from behind the counter. "Coffee's on the house, fellas," he said to the bikers, his voice shaking slightly. The leader smiled. "Appreciate it, but we'll pay double." He turned back to Maddie. "You good?" She nodded, trying to hold back tears. "Yeah, thank you, really." The bikers took their seats quietly, ordering just coffee and pie. The thugs, red-faced and silent, left without another word. The door slammed behind them. As Maddie refilled their cups, she noticed the patch on the leader's vest, Road Angels Motorcycle Club. Her voice trembled. "You guys, are you really angels?" He chuckled softly. Not even close, ma'am. Just men who believe no one deserves to be treated like that." She smiled for the first time that night. "Well, you were my angels tonight." When the bikers left, they paid their check and left $100 tip under the coffee mug. No words, no hero speeches, just quiet decency. Later, when Maddie closed up, she found a small note beneath the money. It read, "Respect doesn't cost a thing, but it can change everything." She held that note for a long moment, her tired eyes glistening. For the first time in months, she didn't feel invisible. She locked the diner door and looked out into the night, whispering a quiet "thank you" to the taillights fading down the highway. Because sometimes kindness wears leather and rides a Harley. That night, the world felt a little safer, not because of the police or the rules, but because a few strangers decided to stand up for what was right. And Maddie would never forget that simple truth. Even in the darkest corners, humanity still walks in, sometimes on two wheels. Black Heart. The next morning, the sun poured through the dusty diner windows, painting golden streaks across the checkered floor. The night's chaos felt like a bad dream, but Maddie still had the note tucked safely in her apron pocket. She kept pulling it out between orders, rereading the same words, "Respect doesn't cost a thing, but it can change everything." It made her chest ache in a strange, hopeful way. A new day, a new face. A few hours into her shift, a man walked in, same leather jacket, same calm eyes. Maddie recognized him instantly. It was the biker leader from last night. He gave her a small nod as he took a seat at the counter. "Morning, Miss Maddie." She blinked. "You remember my name?" He smiled. Hard to forget someone who handles herself that well under pressure. Maddie laughed softly. "You call that handling it? I was shaking like a leaf." He stirred his coffee. "Still stood your ground. That counts for something." There was a pause between them, comfortable, quiet. Then he said, "You shouldn't have to deal with people like that alone." Maddie sighed. "Part of the job, I guess." He shook his head. "Nah, part of life maybe, but not the job." She finally asked, "Why did you help me? You didn't even know me." He looked out the window at the highway stretching beyond the parking lot. "A long time ago, my daughter worked in a diner just like this. She used to call me after her shifts, tell me stories about rude customers and lousy tips." He paused, eyes clouding for a moment. "Then one night she called me crying. Some men harassed her too. I couldn't get there in time. Since then, I promised myself, if I ever saw something like that again, I wouldn't just sit by." Maddie felt a lump rise in her throat. "You did for me what you wished someone had done for her?" He nodded slowly. "Exactly." The room felt heavy with unspoken gratitude. Just as Maddie was about to thank him again, the diner door swung open, and in walked one of the thugs from the night before. Alone this time, head down, a bruise darkening his cheek. The air tensed. He walked up to the counter, eyes fixed on Maddie. "Can I talk to you?" he asked quietly. The biker straightened, ready to intervene, but Maddie raised a hand gently. "It's okay." The thug swallowed hard. "I came to say sorry for real this time. What I did last night was wrong. My buddies and I were drunk, stupid, but seeing how those bikers stood up for you made me realize something. My sister works in a diner too. If someone treated her the way I treated you," his voice cracked, "I'd lose my mind." Maddie stared at him, speechless. Then she gave a small, tired smile. "Thank you. That means a lot." He nodded and quietly placed a 20 on the counter for the coffee and the apology. Then he turned and left. The biker exhaled slowly, watching the man disappear down the street. "Well, I'll be damned," he murmured. That evening, when Maddie finished her shift, she walked outside into the cool twilight. The biker was leaning against his Harley, arms crossed. "You've got some courage, kid," he said. "Guess I learned from the best," she replied, smiling. He chuckled. "You ever think about getting out of here? You're too strong for a town this small." Maddie looked back at the diner, the flickering sign, the smell of grease and coffee, the place that held so many tired nights. Then she looked at the open road stretching toward the horizon. "Maybe someday," she said softly, but for now I think I'll stay. People need kindness here. Someone's got to serve it." The biker grinned. Fair enough. He started his engine, the rumble echoing through the quiet streets. "If you ever need help again, just listen for the sound of thunder." And with that, he rode off into the fading light. Weeks later, Maddie taped the note to the diner's cash register where everyone could see it. "Respect doesn't cost a thing, but it can change everything." Customers started noticing it. Some even smiled, others nodded thoughtfully. The diner felt different now, warmer, safer. Every time Maddie looked at that note, she remembered the lesson that changed her life. Courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes it just keeps serving with kindness until kindness walks back in. And sometimes it rides a Harley. Black heart, it had been 2 weeks since that unforgettable night. Maddie still worked the same late shift at the roadside diner, still wore the same faded apron, but something inside her had changed. She walked with a bit more confidence now. Her smile came easier. She didn't just serve food. She served warmth, dignity, and hope. But deep down, she often wondered if she'd ever see that biker again, the one with kind eyes and a silent strength that made her feel safe for the first time in a long time. One night, dark clouds gathered over the small town. Rain battered the diner windows, lightning flashed across the empty road, and thunder rumbled in the distance. It was a slow night, just Maddie, Frank the cook, and a few regulars. Then suddenly the sound of engines. Dozens of them. The thunder outside grew louder. But this wasn't weather. It was the bikers. Maddie ran to the window. Headlights pierced through the storm as nearly 20 Harleys pulled into the parking lot. Frank looked up, wide-eyed. What in the world? The door swung open, and the familiar leader stepped in, rain dripping from his jacket, eyes warm but serious. "Maddie," he said, tipping his head with a grin. "Hope we ain't interruptin' dinner rush." She broke into a bright smile. "You came back," he nodded. "Told you. If you ever hear thunder, it might just be us." Behind him, the rest of the bikers filled the room. They weren't loud or rough. They greeted her, one by one, like old friends. "We just lost one of our brothers," the leader said quietly. "He loved this place. We thought we'd ride in, have a meal in his memory. He believed in good people, and you, Maddie, are one of them." Her eyes filled with tears. I don't know what to say." "Say you'll join us for pie," one of them said, grinning. That's what he would have wanted. As they sat eating and laughing, the diner door opened again. Maddie turned and froze. It was the same man who had come back to apologize before, the thug. But this time he wasn't alone. He had his little sister with him, maybe 12 years old, holding a small paper box in her hands. He approached the counter slowly, nodding respectfully to the bikers. "Hi, Maddie," he said. "I know it's late, but I wanted to bring you something." He placed the box on the counter and opened it. Inside was a tiny silver charm bracelet, shaped like angel wings. "My sister makes these," he said softly. "She heard what happened that night, and she wanted you to have this, said you're her hero." Maddie covered her mouth, overwhelmed. "Oh, sweetie, thank you," she said, turning to the little girl. "It's beautiful." The biker leader smiled quietly from his booth. "Seems the road keeps sending good people your way." Later that night, when the storm finally cleared, Maddie stepped outside. The sky had opened into a sea of stars. The air smelled of rain and fresh beginnings. The bikers were mounting up, ready to ride. "Thank you," Maddie said, wiping her eyes, "for everything. You changed my life." The leader looked at her gently. "No, Maddie, you changed theirs." He nodded toward the diner window, where the thug and his sister sat eating pie, smiling, laughing, healing. "You gave them a reason to be better," he said. "Kindness does that. It sticks." He revved his engine. The roar filled the night. "If you ever need us again," he added, "just listen for thunder." And with that, the bikers rode off, once more, taillights glowing red against the wet highway, fading into the horizon. Inside the diner, Maddie looked at the charm bracelet sparkling in her hand. She slipped it onto her wrist, the tiny wings catching the light. She whispered to herself, smiling, Sometimes angels wear leather jackets, and sometimes they ride back to remind you that good people still exist. She went back behind the counter, ready for another long shift. But this time her heart was light, because she finally understood kindness isn't weakness. It's the quiet strength that changes everything. And as the night settled in, the diner sign flickered outside, glowing brighter than it had in years. The diner had changed a lot in just a few weeks. The walls were still old, the neon sign still buzzed, but the energy was different. Word had spread around town about what happened that night, the road angels showing up to defend a waitress from a pack of thugs. Since then, people treated Maddie differently. Customers who used to ignore her now greeted her with warmth. Tips got better. The diner owner even fixed the old jukebox for the first time in years. But despite the peace, there was a part of Maddie that felt restless. Every night, as she wiped the tables clean, she'd catch herself staring out the window toward the highway, wondering where those bikers were, what roads they were riding, what stories they were living, and a question kept echoing in her heart. Was this all there was for her? One quiet evening, after closing up, Maddie found an envelope taped to the front door. Her name was written on it in careful handwriting. She tore it open. Inside was a single sheet of paper. "Hey Maddie, we're heading out on a charity ride, raising money for shelters and single moms. We'll be passing through your town this weekend. If you ever thought about taking a little break from the diner life, come join us for a few days. You've got the heart of a rider." Steele, her heart skipped. Steele, that was the biker leader. She read the note twice, then looked up at the neon diner sign flickering outside. For the first time in years, she didn't feel afraid of what was next. The next morning, Maddie walked into the diner early. Frank was prepping for the breakfast rush. She smiled softly. "Hey, Frank, I need to ask you something." He looked up from the grill. "What's up, kid?" She took a deep breath. "You ever feel like there's more out there for you? Like the road's calling your name?" Frank grinned. "Every day since '79. She laughed. "Well, I think it's calling mine now." He froze. "You're not quitting, are you?" "Not forever," she said. "Just taking a break. There's a charity ride coming through this weekend. I want to help. Maybe it's time I see what's beyond this counter." Frank stared at her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Go, kid. You've earned it. Just promise me one thing." "What's that?" "Don't forget where you started." Saturday morning arrived. The roar of engines echoed down the main street as dozens of bikers rolled in, chrome gleaming in the sun. And there he was, Steele, the man who'd changed everything. He saw her standing by the diner steps with a small backpack and her hair tied up under a bandana. "Well, look who decided to answer the call." Maddie grinned, couldn't resist. He handed her a spare helmet. "Hop on, you ride with me." As the engines started up, the townspeople gathered to watch. Frank leaned on the diner doorframe, wiping his hands on a towel and smiling proudly. Maddie climbed onto the Harley, her heart pounding not with fear, but freedom. The road stretched wide and endless before her. Steele revved the engine, ready. She tightened her grip and whispered, "Always." And with that, they rode off past the diner, past the small town limits, and into the open horizon. The journey wasn't easy. The roads were long, the nights cold, but every mile filled Maddie with something she hadn't felt in years. Purpose. She served food at roadside shelters, handed out blankets at women's centers, and even told her story at small town diners, just like the one she left behind. People listened, some cried, some smiled, but all of them walked away believing again in simple goodness, the kind that starts with one brave act. Months later, Maddie returned to her old diner. It was quiet, just like before, but she was different now. She found Frank sitting at the counter reading the paper. When he looked up, his face broke into a grin. "Well, if it ain't my runaway waitress," she laughed, hugging him tight. "Told you I'd be back." "Did you find what you were looking for?" he asked. She thought for a moment. "Not exactly, but I found something better." "What's that?" "People, kindness, and the road. It's not just about where you go. It's about who you become along the way." Maddie took off her bracelet, the one with the angel wings. and hung it above the diner counter. Beneath it, she taped a new note for everyone to see: stand up when it's hard, help when it's easier to walk away. The world doesn't change through big speeches, it changes one act of courage at a time. She poured herself a cup of coffee, smiled at the rising sun, and whispered to herself, sometimes the toughest roads lead to the kindest souls. And somewhere far down the highway, the faint rumble of engines answered back, reminding her that she would always be part of something bigger, because kindness, like the road, never ends. Black Heart.